October 3rd, 1974, 2:17 a.m. Nicky Barnes sat across from Detective Richie Roberts in a windowless room at the 32nd Precinct. His hands weren't cuffed. There was no lawyer present. Just two men, a tape recorder, and information that would destroy Frank Lucas's entire empire. Nicky leaned forward, smiled, and said four words that would change everything: "Let me tell Frank." But here's what nobody knew. Frank Lucas had been expecting this moment for 6 months. And what he did in the next 48 hours wouldn't just save his life, it would prove why he was the smartest businessman Harlem had ever seen. To understand this betrayal, you need to understand who Frank Lucas was in 1974. He wasn't just another street hustler. He was a self-made entrepreneur who'd revolutionized an entire industry through innovation, discipline, and an unbreakable code of honor. Frank had grown up in Greensboro, North Carolina, watching his cousin get murdered by the Ku Klux Klan for looking at a white woman. He'd learned early that the system wasn't built for people who looked like him. So when he arrived in Harlem in 1946 at age 15, he made himself a promise: never be powerless again. He worked for Bumpy Johnson, Harlem's legendary protector, learning everything. How to read people. How to build loyalty. How to move in silence. When Bumpy died in 1968, Frank didn't fight for the throne. He built his own kingdom, smarter, quieter, more efficient. Frank's genius was simple: cut out the middlemen. While everyone else paid inflated prices through Italian suppliers, Frank went directly to the source in Southeast Asia, establishing legitimate import-export businesses. He created a brand new blue magic that represented quality and reliability. His business model was so efficient that he could offer better value while making bigger profits. By 1974, Frank Lucas was worth an estimated $50 million. He owned apartment buildings in Harlem, providing affordable housing. He invested in legitimate businesses, creating jobs. He kept his family close, his circle small, and his profile lower than anyone at his level. He wore simple clothes while other dealers drove Rolls-Royces. He walked through Harlem streets without bodyguards because he'd earned genuine respect, not fear. People called him Mr. Frank, and when he walked past, grandmothers smiled because he'd paid their rent when they fell behind. But success breeds envy. And nobody envied Frank more than Nicky Barnes. Nicky was everything Frank wasn't. Flashy. Loud. Arrogant. He wore mink coats and drove Benzes. He dated models and appeared in magazine spreads. While Frank moved in silence, Nicky courted attention like it was oxygen. They'd worked together in the late 60s, a profitable partnership that made both men wealthy. But Nicky wanted something Frank would never give him: equal status. Nicky saw himself as Frank's partner. Frank saw Nicky as an employee, a capable one, but still someone who worked for him, not with him. The split came in 1971. Nicky wanted to expand aggressively, flood the market, maximize short-term profits. Frank refused. Greed attracts attention, Frank told him. Attention attracts police. Police attract federal prosecutors. You want to get rich or you want to stay rich? Nicky stormed out of that meeting and started his own operation. Within 2 years, he'd built the Council, 7 dealers who controlled significant territory. They were successful, making millions, but they were also reckless. Nicky's face was on the cover of the New York Times Magazine in June 1977 with the headline "Mr. Untouchable." He was proud of that cover. Frank saw it and shook his head. The man just painted a target on his own back, Frank told his brother, Huey. But what Frank didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Nicky had already made his move. August 1974. Detective Richie Roberts had been investigating organized distribution networks in Harlem for 3 years. Roberts was different from other cops. He didn't take bribes. He didn't look the other way. He'd once found $1 million in cash during a raid and turned in every penny. Other cops called him a Boy Scout. Criminals respected him because he played by his own code. Roberts had been building a case against Frank Lucas for 18 months. But Frank was careful. Too careful. Every business was legitimate on paper. Every transaction had documentation. Every employee had clean records. Roberts had suspicions but no proof. That's when Nicky Barnes reached out. Nicky had been arrested in July on a minor charge, nothing serious, would have been out in weeks. But he used that arrest to make contact with Roberts. Not officially. No lawyers. No deals on the table. Just a conversation. "You're chasing the wrong guy," Nicky told Roberts during his chance encounter at the courthouse. "Frank Lucas isn't the genius everyone thinks he is. He's just lucky. And his luck is about to run out." Roberts was skeptical. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Frank thinks he's better than everyone else. And I'm tired of watching him play king while taking credit for other people's work." Over the next 6 weeks, Nicky fed Roberts information. Small things at first. An address here. A name there. Nothing concrete enough to act on, but enough to keep Roberts interested. The trap was being set, but not for who Roberts thought. September 28, 1974. Frank Lucas received an unexpected visitor at his home in Teaneck, New Jersey. His cousin, a man named Jimmy, who worked low-level distribution in the Bronx. Jimmy was nervous, sweating despite the cool autumn evening. Frank poured him a drink, waited. "I need to tell you something, Frank. And you're not going to like it. Then tell me and let me decide. Nicky's been talking to the police. Federal Task Force. That detective, Roberts. I heard it from Tony, who heard it from someone in Nicky's crew. They're planning something big." Frank's face didn't change. He took a slow sip of his whiskey. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 2 months. Maybe longer." "And you're just telling me now?" Jimmy looked down. "I wasn't sure it was true. I didn't want to believe it. Nicky's always talking big, you know? I thought it was just noise." Frank stood up, walked to the window overlooking his manicured lawn. His children's toys were scattered in the yard. His wife, Julie, was inside putting the kids to bed. This was the life he'd built. Legal. Clean. Legitimate. "Thank you for telling me, Jimmy. Go home. Don't talk about this with anyone." After Jimmy left, Frank made a single phone call. Not to a lawyer. Not to his crew. To an accountant named Arnold Rothstein who specialized in complex financial documentation. "Arnold, I need you to audit everything. Every business, every account, every transaction for the past 5 years. If there's anything that could be misinterpreted, I need to know about it tonight." "Tonight?" "Frank, that's impossible. I'll pay you 5 times your usual rate. Have it done by morning? I'll need access to. You'll have everything you need in 1 hour." Frank spent that night preparing for war. But not the kind of war Nicky expected. Frank was preparing a legal defense, documenting legitimate income sources, organizing business records that could withstand the most aggressive audit. By 4 a.m., Arnold had his answer. "You're clean, Frank. Cleaner than most Fortune 500 CEOs I've worked with. Every dollar can be traced to legitimate business operations." "Good. Now I need you to do something else." October 2nd, 1974. Nicky Barnes walked into the 32nd Precinct at 11 p.m. He'd called Roberts earlier that day, said he had something big. Information that would change everything. Roberts met him in interview room 3. No recording equipment visible, though Nicky knew the room was wired. That was fine. He wanted this recorded. "I'm ready to tell you about Frank Lucas's operation," Nicky said. "But I have conditions." "I don't make deals without lawyers present," Roberts replied. "This isn't about a deal. This is about truth. Frank Lucas has been lying to everyone, his suppliers, his competitors, even the community that protects him. And I'm going to tell you exactly how he does it." Nicky talked for 3 hours. He outlined business operations, named associates, described logistics. He painted a picture of a massive criminal enterprise that stretched from Southeast Asia to Harlem. There was only one problem with everything Nicky said. Half of it was about his own operation, not Frank's. And the other half was speculation, rumors, assumptions. But Roberts didn't know that yet. "This is enough for warrants," Roberts said. "We can move on this by end of week." Nicky smiled. "There's one more thing. Frank's having a meeting tomorrow night. His whole inner circle. All the key people in one place. If you wanted to make a statement." Roberts leaned back. "Where?" "The Red Rooster, 138th and Lenox. Back room. 9 p.m. "How do you know about this meeting?" "Because he invited me. He doesn't know I know he knows about me talking to you. He thinks he's setting up his own play. But I'm 3 moves ahead." What Nicky didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that Frank Lucas had never planned a meeting at the Red Rooster. And Frank definitely knew about Nicky's conversations with Roberts. Because Detective Roberts had a problem. He had a partner named Lou Tubac who wasn't as ethical as Roberts. And Lou Tubac had called Frank Lucas 6 weeks ago. "Mr. Lucas, I think you should know there's someone in your circle talking to my partner. I'm not saying this for money. I'm saying it because I respect how you operate. You keep the streets quiet. You take care of people. The others don't." Frank had thanked Detective Tubac, then hung up. He didn't trust Tubac's motives, but he verified the information through 3 independent sources. Once confirmed, Frank didn't react emotionally. He planned strategically. Frank knew Nicky would eventually try to set up a trap. So Frank decided to set his own. October 3rd, 1974, 8:47 p.m. Frank Lucas sat in the back room of the Red Rooster. But he wasn't alone. With him were his lawyer, David Breitbart, 2 accountants, and a stenographer. "Are we recording?" Frank asked. "Everything," Breitbart confirmed. At 8:55 p.m., the door opened. But it wasn't Nicky Barnes. It was Detective Richie Roberts, followed by 12 federal agents. "Frank Lucas, you're under arrest for—" "No, I'm not," Frank interrupted calmly. "David, please explain." Breitbart stood up, handed Roberts a thick manila folder. "Inside you'll find comprehensive documentation of every business transaction Mr. Lucas has conducted for the past 5 years. Tax returns, audited by 3 independent firms. Business licenses, all current and valid. Property deeds, all properly registered. Import-export documentation, all approved by Customs." Roberts opened the folder, started reading. His face changed. "You'll also find," Breitbart continued, "sworn affidavits from 47 employees, 23 business partners, and 15 community leaders attesting to Mr. Lucas's legitimate business operations and charitable contributions. This doesn't prove." "It proves," Frank said quietly, "that whatever information you received about me is either false or based on activities you can't prove because they don't exist in a way you can prosecute." Roberts stared at Frank. "Nicky Barnes gave us detailed information." "Nicky Barnes," Frank replied, "is telling you about his own operation and attributing it to me. Check every address he gave you. Every name. Every detail. Then check who actually controls those operations." Frank stood up. "I'm not a criminal, Detective Roberts. I'm a businessman who grew up in poverty and built something legitimate. I provide housing, I create jobs, I support my community. That's not criminal activity. That's the American dream." Roberts looked at his agents, then back at Frank. "We have testimony. You have the testimony of a jealous competitor trying to eliminate his rival by using you as a weapon. That's not justice. That's manipulation." The room was silent for a long moment. Then Roberts did something that surprised everyone. He closed the folder and handed it back to Breitbart. "We'll be investigating these claims," Roberts said. "Thoroughly." "I welcome that," Frank replied. "I have nothing to hide. After Roberts and his agents left, Frank's lawyer exhaled loudly. That was too close. No, Frank said. That was exactly what needed to happen. I don't understand. Nicky tried to destroy me by giving them information. But the information he gave them was about himself, mixed with lies about me. Now when they investigate, they'll find evidence against Nicky, not me. He literally just built his own case. You planned this? I prepared for every possibility. That's different. October 15, 1974. Nicky Barnes was arrested at his apartment in Manhattan. The charges were extensive, backed by the same information he'd provided about Frank Lucas. Except when investigators checked the addresses, bank accounts, and associates, they all traced back to Nicky's own organization. Nicky had been so focused on framing Frank that he'd accidentally confessed to his own operations. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in Harlem. The man who called himself Mr. Untouchable had touched himself. Frank Lucas visited Detective Roberts 1 week after Nicky's arrest. They met at a diner in Queens, neutral territory. You knew, Roberts said. You knew he was setting himself up. I knew he was trying to set me up, Frank corrected. I just made sure I was ready for it. The rest was his own doing. Why didn't you retaliate? Why didn't you handle this differently? Frank took a sip of coffee. Because that's not who I am, detective. I don't operate through violence. I operate through intelligence. Nicky thought betrayal was about information. He was wrong. Betrayal is about trust. And I never trusted him enough to be betrayed. That's why you kept everything legitimate. That's why I keep everything legitimate. I learned from Bumpy Johnson, the best protection isn't guns or muscle. It's making yourself too valuable to destroy and too clean to prosecute. Roberts leaned back. I'm still going to investigate you. I hope you do. Because when you finish, you'll realize I'm exactly who I say I am. A businessman. A father. A member of my community. Frank stood up, left money for the coffee. One more thing, detective. When you arrest Nicky's associates, remember that some of them are just people trying to survive. They're not all like Nicky. Some of them deserve a second chance. Roberts watched Frank Lucas walk out of that diner. He'd spent years chasing Frank, believing he was a criminal mastermind. And he was right, Frank was a mastermind. But not the kind Roberts expected. Nicky Barnes was convicted in 1978 and sentenced to life in prison. He eventually became an informant, providing information about real criminal organizations. But by then, Frank Lucas had already transitioned completely into legitimate business. Frank's betrayal by Nicky didn't destroy him. It validated him. It proved that his strategy, stay clean, stay smart, stay legitimate, was the right path. Years later, when asked about Nicky's betrayal, Frank said something that summarized his entire philosophy. Nicky thought he was 3 moves ahead. But in chess, the person who wins isn't the one who makes the most aggressive moves. It's the one who protects their king while their opponent destroys themselves. The biggest betrayal Frank Lucas ever faced wasn't the one that destroyed him. It was the one that proved he'd been building something indestructible all along. If this story of preparation, intelligence, and turning betrayal into victory inspired you, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like if you believe real success comes from legitimacy, not shortcuts. Share this with someone who needs to understand that the smartest move is always the legal one. And let me know in the comments, what would you have done in Frank's position? More legendary stories coming soon. Don't miss it.